Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from NASCAR.info coming at you from the conclusion of the Pennzoil 400 presented by Jiffy Lube at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight. We'll be definitely talking about all the craziness from the Cup Series race, as we do every week, as well as the Xfinity and Truck Series action from this weekend as well. Thank you all for tuning in today. Alex Bowman, pending, of course, post-race inspection, which became quite the big story this weekend, certainly in both Friday and Saturday's races, is unofficially your race winner today. A dramatic finish with his teammate Kyle Larson, both of them settling the win between themselves there, and having a pretty good finish between them. A finish that ordinarily looked like it was going to be between Kyle Busch and his backup car, going against Martin Truex Jr. for the victory. Truex and Kyle still had, were able to be in contention at the end there to try to go for it, and unfortunately just fell a bit short. Also, Ross Chastain, have to give a big congratulations to him. His best career race, I think I would have to say. I mean, they said that he led more laps than in any of his previous starts. Certainly brings back memories of his run in the Southern 500 just last year for the 42 car. But after having a really difficult start to the year, had a backup car of his own that he had to run in Fontana, had last place finish in the Daytona 500 to start the year, comes back out in this one, and has just a fantastic run out there. It's unfortunate they couldn't pull off the victory, but unofficially a third place finish for him. It has to be a fantastic note for the Trackhouse team, especially with their other team finishing in last place, as Daniel Suarez got his first last place run since July of 2019 at the Daytona race there in the midsummer race. Suarez getting last place run there. Also the first last place run for the number 99 since 2018, when I believe it was Gray Galding was driving for Starcom Racing back when they had two entries for a little while. There was a last place run at Bristol, and the first time the 99s finished last at the Las Vegas track as well. So, I mean, definitely got to talk about that. We'll also talk about the new series that started this week, the NASCAR Broadcast Problems series that actually was going to start it before the Fontana weekend, but then actually had some ideas during that weekend to kind of polish that up and get that online. A lot of good discussion about it, and we'll certainly talk about that tonight as well. But before we get into that, I mean, again, definitely want to talk more about this Cup Series race here again. Kyle Busch, not the least bit happy with Alex Bowman's victory there. Certainly the radio traffic as posted by Jeff Gluck in the immediate aftermath of the race that Bowman kind of backs into these victories. I'm kind of reminded, I think Darrell Waltrip said, not with the same level of obscenity, but the same frustration with fuel mileage races back in the early 90s. I remember when Harry Gant won his last race in 92, he was very frustrated that Gant seemed to kind of back into some of these wins. But then, of course, like Bowman, he had to, some of these wins were very hard fought ones as well. Bowman, certainly the Martinsville race last year, the Dover race, or just plain getting that victory at Fontana in 2020. Plenty of things to point at here, but he's definitely made that 48 car his own, and that's exciting to see. And he may not have been the most dominant car out there, but again, he was in the right position, and in some of these races, that's exactly where you have to be. Have to say, I was very surprised, as I mentioned at the beginning here, that when you had that side-by-side battle with Bowman and Larson down the stretch, that in past races, usually if a battle goes that long, you got the next row like right on their heels there pretty quickly. But unfortunately, again, Ross Chastain, Kyle Busch, the others behind him, couldn't catch up to him and make it more of a race between them. Perhaps another quirk with this new car as everybody still gets things figured out here in these first couple of weeks. As we saw at Fontana, we saw a lot of spins, a lot of mechanical issues at the same time too, and a lot of pre-race penalties, as a lot of these teams are still trying to figure things out at the same time. Kyle Busch's aforementioned backup car not being the least of those, after apparently damage to the rear windscreen after backing into the outside wall, forced them to run what was apparently a Denny Hamlin backup there this past week here. Hamlin himself having the transmission issue there, a little bit of a mistaken muscle memory there, slamming the thing into reverse when he was trying to come off of pit road, ends up tearing the transmission out of that thing, and they were done for the day. Fuel pump issues were issues again for Greg Biffle at the back of the pack there. The New York racing team making their first start since the Daytona 500 with Greg Biffle in the car. Unfortunately, the fuel pump issue that they had back at Daytona, I don't know if this is the same car or not. I know as a small organization, they don't have as many cars as maybe some of these larger teams do. But certainly it was a similar issue there for the 44 that ended up dropping them out and putting them into the bottom 5. Ryan Blaney eliminated in an accident there with Brad Keselowski finishing in the 36th spot, 2 spots behind Biffle. Chase Briscoe got involved in a couple of those incidents, including the Suarez one, where he was checking up behind a couple of cars, end up losing control and body slamming Suarez there. 99 hooked into the outside wall. Good to see Suarez walk away from that one. Briscoe didn't complete too many more laps before he was out of the race, and Cole Custer with an engine failure, dropping him out in the bottom 5. So, I was about to say that this was a race that was a little less crazy than Fontana, but watching it on TV, I mean, it still seemed like you had enough of, you had a little bit of everything there in terms of long green flag runs and some certain stack-ups there between some of the other drivers out there. Of course, the brutal hit that Eric Jones had at the end. Jones himself was coming back from a number of different issues in the early part of the race. He had, it looked like, just as fast of a car as he had at Fontana, but then apparently had a valve stem issue on a tire on one pit stop. He ran out of brake fluid. They had to retop that off. That's why his hood was up at one point. And it looked like, I believe he had even a third issue on top of that before even his final run up the standings, but then pounded the outside wall off of turn 4. A very scary moment there as Bubba Wallace almost collided with him. Just missed him there. A great reaction there for the number 23 car. Unfortunately, still skated into the inside wall. Wallace still finished one lap down to the 25th spot, right behind Brad Keselowski. So actually a good job by the 2311 team to get that car back out there and get a decent finish, whereas Eric Jones ends up back in the 31st spot, 1 spot ahead of Denny Hamlin, just outside the bottom 5 in the results here. Let's see here. Going further up, Harrison Burton seemed to be bouncing off just about everybody. He was kind of in the middle of a couple of these incidents, finishing in the 16th position. Kurt Busch in 13th. That should kind of give him another foothold to stay in the top 16 in points here. Christopher Bell, much like Chastain, had really had a lot of struggles at the beginning of the year. Of course, another last place finisher, his back at Fontana last week, was involved in the big one at Daytona, was very far down in the standings. Certainly anticipate both the 20 and the 1 to climb up the point standings quite a bit. After their good runs out there. Bell with a pole and finishing in the 10th spot there. Truex slipped back to 8th in the final order there behind Tyler Reddick. Reddick looked like he was going to have all kinds of problems after the steering repairs that they had to make before he got back out onto the track to start the race today. Dropped him to the back of the pack, spun the car out into the infield grass, and bounced back from that very well in the 7th spot. I didn't expect him to be as good here as he had been at Fontana. I always figured he'd be better at a track that you kind of have to hug the high lane. Seems like a lot of drivers that were hugging the high lane here had problems at one point or another. Eric Almirola, gotta say, can't sleep on this driver this year. Maybe his last season as a full-time competitor, but after his top 10 at Fontana last week, he has another one in his back pocket with a 6th place run here. Great to see out of him there. Maybe that, usually you see with these drivers scale back or plan to have this be their final season, they kind of have more middling pack runs. But at least in these couple of rounds here to start the season off, good to see Almirola have some good performances there. But certainly, I guess there's a good amount of debate about who would be the biggest heartbreak of this race, whether it's Kyle Busch coming back from all that his team had endured with the backup car originally, or the issues with Ross Chastain, the fact that he had led so many of the laps after having such a miserable start to the year, or even Christopher Bell, you could probably argue, with his pole position and fighting his way back into contention one time or another. He was further back than Kyle Busch and Chastain were, but still, has a lot that he could look forward to in Phoenix and the next few races ahead. But Phoenix, of course, Alex Bowman's home track, and a track that Kyle Larson won the championship at last year. So it looks like, given Chevy kind of getting their feet back under him at Fontana, especially more on the Childress side, even though the race was won by Hendrick Motorsports with Kyle Larson. Didn't see as much Childress success there outside of the partner team with Ross Chastain there in the one, but certainly, well, and then also Tyler Reddick, of course, in the top 10. But having the 2 tire stops there for Byron, for Bowman, and for Larson, getting them back up there, it seemed like that was 2 tires was all they needed to stay up there. So that was really surprising. Yep, and Eric Jones, again, I hope that things work out pretty well for him going forward, even after trashing that car there. Had great runs in all 3 of these races, had some adversity to overcome in 2 of them, but still something that, is going to be interesting coming up here as we go back to the 1 mile track in Phoenix next weekend. But definitely kind of an interesting race, though. I think that it was a competitive one. I mean, it definitely had quite a few cautions, 12 it's showing here on the leaderboard here at the conclusion of that. I still think one thing that was very pleasing, I think that a lot of these teams had actually kind of figured out a little bit better than last time, was managing to get back to pit road with flat tires or tires coming apart. At least from what I saw, I didn't see any drivers that were losing multiple laps because of a flat tire, like we saw back at Fontana. Perhaps the advantage of having that infield short track there that allowed kind of a shortcut onto pit road. Seemed like a couple drivers were taking advantage of that to get back in there. I think that really helped out with a couple of these teams. So hopefully this issue that we had back at Fontana, maybe either of these teams are figuring out a way to kind of work around that, or maybe it just kind of worked out that way. Obviously Christopher Bell had, some serious damage to his car when it was hopping around so violently on the back straightaway. But I was pleased to see that wasn't as much of an issue here. That was definitely a bigger concern. But it could be just the way the track is laid out. I think Phoenix is another possibility with the pit road being arranged in such a bizarre way that you got to enter it way back off of the new turn 2. If you have a problem on the other end of the track there, I think also with the drivers coming off the banking and using the flat of the track, I think we're going to see a lot of mechanical issues and possibly a lot of tire punctures in that race there. Certainly in practice, maybe not in the race, but I think there's going to be a lot for these guys to figure out about how much punishment these cars can deal with. I think it'll be a good preview for perhaps some of these road course races coming up later this year, where you got to worry about running off course or curbs and all that stuff too. So next week will be kind of interesting with that situation. But I again, really good to see. I mean, actually, I'm looking at the results here. Actually, I take that back. Richard Childress' team did do very well. Not just Tyler Reddick in 7th spot, but Austin Dillon coming off his runner-up finish in Fontana to finish 11th in this race here. So very good there for the. Childress teams keeping right up to pace with the Hendrick guys, and that's certainly good to see, even with all the craziness that happened there. Corey LaJoie in the 15th spot, didn't see a whole lot of him out of there in that race, although he kind of worked his way into the top 5 at one point there on pit strategy there, but a good run for him. Also, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., where did he finish? It looks like he might got to drop back a bit. Yeah, 21st, third from the last car on the lead lap. That was unfortunate. It looked like he really had something kind of land in his lap there when the caution came out before he had come down pit road. And seemed like he was going to be set for another good finish like he had back at Fontana. Unfortunately, dropped further back in the order. I still think I think even Bob Pockris picked him as the dark horse among his picks today. So that would be kind of another one to certainly look at there too. A bit more struggles for BJ McLeod and Garrett Smithley, who had career best equaling or career best overall runs in Fontana. The both of them were actually trading last place for most of this event in the early laps, with McLeod finishing ahead of Smithley in the 28th spot, and Smithley back in the 30th spot, climbing their way up ahead of all the drivers that had dropped out. I was kind of expecting coming into this race that Greg Biffle was going to have the most issues, again, being a part-timer, but I was pleased to see that during the opening run, he was running about the 27th to 25th spot, and actually we had so many cautions with a few cars losing laps in the first 20 laps, that we actually had all the cars on the lead lap, even at the moment that Suarez wrecked. Highly unusual for a 1.5 to 2 mile track. It's usual that we see drivers that are multiple laps down, certainly in the Gen 6 era. And I think it really speaks to again, this new car and everybody figuring out the technical alliances that certainly have helped out the Rick Ware Racing effort, BJ McLeod's effort also improving at the same time and kind of able to close the gap there too. Despite the fact that it was kind of more of a challenge for them today, again, I think we saw a better performance overall out of them. And again, if it certainly helps in one of these, it's just like anything happened with any of these underfunded drivers in the past. You get to put a few of them in the rearview mirror when they have engine problems or a mechanical issue or they get eliminated in an accident. You get that much further ahead of them there, and you have that much better of if it's a points day or a money day or whatever the common situation is now for teams that are still chartered programs out there. That was certainly good to see. We saw Cody Ware lose a lap to the leaders in the final stages there. He actually finished just one lap down. I think the broadcast kind of made it seem like he was just lap traffic and he was multiple laps down. That was not the case. So again, and he finished 26th there, which was actually ahead of, not only, of course, the drivers that retired, but guys like Josh Bilicki and BJ McLeod and Michael McDowell, like other competitors that they're kind of setting their sights on this season. So kudos to him on that as well. Daniel Hemrick, I think, has been kind of an interesting story. He seems to be caught up in every single one of these actual mechanical issues through pre-race inspection, whether it's being sent to the back of the field or having a pass-through penalty. I believe he had the pass-through at Daytona. And then issues at Fontana as well when he had the shifter issue there that cost him multiple laps and getting those back. Hamrick shown in the finish of this race in the 22nd spot, next to last on the lead lap, just ahead of Todd Gilliland, the last car on the lead lap in 23rd spot. Really an interesting story. I guess Hemrick really, after getting his first championship, his first Xfinity win, he's been kind of the overcoming adversity driver on the Cup Series side this year. We'll see if that continues at Phoenix as he returns. I guess he's still slated to run the 16 next week. I know that's been a car we're going to see juggled between him and Gregson and Allmendinger this year. But we'll see how that shakes out once we get the entry list posted later this week. But overall, yeah, I mean, I thought it was a solid race. I know I saw some questions in here about the broadcast there too. Yeah, I mean, certainly with Danica Patrick. First of all, I'm not sure if Las Vegas is a track that Danica Patrick particularly wants to go back to. Not to make too much out of that exactly, but it has been more than a decade at this point. But again, I think I think the one thing that was interesting with her broadcast today was kind of getting the open wheeler's perspective on just these changes to the car and if some of these changes are getting the sport kind of closer to an open wheel framework. There was talk about like the shorter pit stops where you have the crew members kind of stationed in the pit stall like you see in Formula One, about the jacks, the automatic jacks in the back of the cars, like in IndyCar, and things of that nature. I thought it was kind of interesting getting her insight on the technical side of it, which was kind of surprising here. So that was kind of an interesting aspect of it. I didn't think she did too bad. I thought Clint Boyer seemed like he didn't really know exactly how to talk to her. I felt that they were a little bit awkward together there. But I think that's going to be inevitable if they're going to be continuing to change which drivers they're having in the booth and everything. I think they're going to get some friction one way or the other where things don't quite fit together there. I don't think it was terrible. I've certainly heard worse. But, and yeah, I'm seeing comments relating to her SRX broadcast too. I think it was better than the SRX broadcast. I think that Mike Joy is a little more even paced with his play-by-play than Alan Bestwick is. Alan Bestwick is like, much more. He still has that early 2000s kind of angle there where he's very fast paced. And I think Danica has a hard time keeping up with that. I think now that Mike Joy is kind of getting into, as now the real seasoned veteran in the booth there. I didn't think there was too much of a problem between the two of them, but I thought the thing with her and Clint was really awkward, a little bit there. But other than that, I mean, I can't be too critical there. I thought that, the technical side of these cars, I think is one thing that I think there's still a little bit of mystery about, and we're still kind of discovering how these cars fail, and issues with them. So getting people that are, experts in different forms of motorsports, I think is a great idea. I hope actually we get people like Andy Lally, in the booth at one point if they're not actually in the cars themselves. People with more of a road racing sports car background, because I think that's where these cars, the next gen cars, really are very reminiscent. Is much more of these cars with the body work and the rear diffusers and the way these cars are really designed. So I think that would be kind of another thing to certainly look at there. I don't know if that's exactly in the plans, but that would be interesting to certainly find out. 78 viewers in here. Wow. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in here. We're just still talking about the Cup Series race here. We'll talk about the Xfinity and Truck Series races. If you guys, any of you guys here are new, we'll do some trivia segment here towards the latter part of the show. And given the fact that technical inspection ended up being a critical role here, I think we really will wait for inspection results here for the Cup Series in this broadcast. I know I had hoped to do that at Daytona, but actually, I think we had a 3-hour show that night, and it was still another hour after I called the show there that they finally declared that Austin Cindric was a winner. Hopefully, we're not going to have to wait quite that long today, but we'll certainly stay tuned as best we can on that. But yeah, a lot of positives from this one. I think that, we didn't see, I think it would have been forgivable for people to be concerned going into this race that it was going to be a bit more of the usual Gen 6 long green flag runs. We had some long green flag runs, but they were interesting. The battle between Truex and Kyle Busch was captivating. You actually saw battles for the lead and leads taken and brought back. I thought Kyle Larson versus Ross Chastain earlier in the race was really interesting. I think that was really the signal to me personally that Chastain was doing as well as he had been. Him actually getting up there and taking the lead, I thought that was fantastic. It's been so long since we've seen, especially at 1.5 mile tracks, people able to get up to the front and actually take the spot. That's been really refreshing to see in this sport, and I hope we could see more of it. I think in these next few races it'll be interesting. Phoenix is going to be such a short race. Now, I don't know if we're going to have a whole lot of cautions like we had here. And then, of course, I saw some comments here already, some anxiety about the Atlanta race, and I don't blame you. I share that too. The last time Atlanta was repaved, it had that record speed with Jeff Bodine's pole back then. Record that I believe still stood through now. But also, again, the widening of that straightaway, the approach now where they're kind of treating it more like a super speedway. Thankful the tests seem to go okay without a serious hitch. But I do think that I think there may be some concerns about, treating that track as a super speedway. I don't know how that's going to shake out, I think the Truck Series, the Xfinity Series, I don't know. I'm not as concerned about them. At least the cars are more of a known entity, but we might. I think we're going to see some blistering speeds there, and I hope that the tires and the cars are up for the challenge. And we just don't know. We just really don't know. And we'll certainly be talking about that. We go out there in a couple of weeks to talk about that race as well. I think that's going to be a really interesting kind of way to have this play out here at the same time. So let's talk about the Xfinity Series race as well. As I mentioned at the beginning, of course, and a couple of you guys pointed out pretty well on Twitter. A little bit of a challenge there. I talked back at the Fontana show after we got back from the trackside coverage there, that the hardest way to actually cover a last place battle firsthand is when you have cars that are having issues on pit road and you can only be in one place and you can't catch it all the time and the crews are busy doing whatever. That is probably the hardest thing to do. The second hardest aspect of it is certainly the post-race disqualifications. I've had some of those happen actually when covering the action at a track. I know there were some questions about the last time we'd seen so many disqualifications in such a short period of time. Actually, Lastbro reminded me earlier today, back when we were at Darlington in 2017, Denny Hamlin actually had an encumbered finish at both the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series race after winning the both of them. But at the time, they didn't have the disqualification rules in place, so those weren't actually disqualifications. You got to keep those victories, but they were encumbered during that same weekend there. Technically not a disqualification in the same sense, because, of course, we look at a driver that is classified last, even though they didn't actually finish there. But we certainly saw that in both the Saturday race in the Xfinity Series and the Friday Truck Series race at this same track. Looking at the Xfinity Series race, the original last place finisher was going to be Brennan Poole, which was already kind of an unfortunate situation there. I had already written, I thought I was really kind of pleased about getting, a good story about Mike Harmon Racing and all the adversity they've been trying to overcome. Certainly the testing violation penalty that saddled their 74 car, which they did not bring out to the West Coast swing. Just bringing the 47 car out there. The fact that they just had white tape numbers on the front of the car, that Brennan Poole was wearing his uniform and helmet from back in 2020, because we'd seen him out of the Cup Series and really out of any kind of regular series ride for so long. But good to see him back out there. Unfortunately, the float and the carburetor being the issue, as the 47 car was kind of sputtering around the track. They get back out there, they tune the car up, they get some sponsorship. The Lerner and Rowe attorneys signed back up with him. Actually, if I remember correctly, they sponsored Bailey Curry when he had a top 10 run going at Phoenix just last year. So it's good to see some returning backers coming for even these small teams. But they tuned that car up and they got a great qualifying lap in. They got that car in the show, which was absolutely not guaranteed, with a very quick turnaround. I think right up there with Landon Castle and getting that car pieced back together after that terrible fire that they had back at Fontana. I think those were two of the big stories from that qualifying session there. But unfortunately, the 47, either the engine was tuned up too high after that qualifying lap or something else went loose. But the 47 blew up there after just 3 laps and looked to be the last place finisher. And people asking, it's like, the challenge is, of course, usually during a race, especially once last place is settled early, I kind of get a head start on the article. I still kind of listen to the transmissions over the radio just if there's anything else that picks up. So I get notes on other drivers if they turn out to be factors in the last place battles themselves. Certainly the bottom 5 usually gets featured that way. But of course, when you have a driver that's disqualified and sent to the back of the field, it's actually more, there's not as many deletions as there are just additions to the article. In both the cases on Friday and Saturday, what I do usually is I write a biographical section about the driver. And if the disqualification comes in afterwards, I just cut that part out and save it for later. And I have about 7 or 8 of those now where a driver was disqualified. I'm like, well, I'm not going to delete this and have to reinvent the wheel if they finish last like the next month or the next year or whenever. So I have a few of those on hand, and that actually kind of helps me generate the content a little bit quicker. And that was certainly the case with Brennan Poole. So if Poole ends up finishing last, that section of the article is actually pretty much already written. So that'll just kind of be fine-tuned at that point. So basically what I end up doing, and you'll see this actually in both the articles, both the Truck and Xfinity ones are already posted there. Basically, I'll describe what happened in the race, and then I'll say, but this happened afterwards. And then that's the easiest way to go with that. And then, of course, updating the statistics and so forth. I usually wait until after all 3 races are over with for the weekend before I update the stats pages. So, there's that kind of saves a lot of time from having to do it again. After having done this for a few years now, that's always been kind of part of the challenge, is trying to find the most efficient way to do it. Because other than the articles that William Saki and Ben Schneider do for the website, and they do fantastic work for sure, the rest of it is just me, and that's it. So if it doesn't get done, it's just not going to get done. So that's kind of where that goes in. So I got to kind of find the right way to get that done and make sure to still balance the 9 to 5 the rest of the week. But that was kind of the challenge there. If we get into disqualifications tonight, that article is pretty much written, but I do have, if I have to save that section on Daniel Suarez for another race, well, then there you go. Then that part's already written too. So that'll be kind of the look there. But yeah, Ryan Sieg, we got to talk about that. Got a lot of interesting discussion there about the Ty Gibbs situation there with Ryan Sieg. And again, this, as memory serves, this isn't the first time that Ty Gibbs has publicly apologized for, saying something, one way or the other. I believe last year he got caught up in something where I guess he was critical of Daytona and saying that the real racing was going to be coming up the next week or something in the ARCA series. And he said something about that when he won the Daytona Road Course race the following week, his first Xfinity Series win. This, however, being much more a racing-related incident, him making very slight contact with Ryan Sieg's car at the beginning of the race, just 4 or 5 laps into the event, sending the 39 into the outside wall. Now, of course, 2 very opposite ends of the spectrum here. We have a Joe Gibbs Racing entry that is automatically the default one of the favorites every week, no matter who's driving it, whether it's Kyle Busch during all of those races he ran through last season, or Ty Gibbs, who's now, just won 4 races of his own last year and then claimed the victory this time around. Versus Ryan Sieg, who has yet to score a win, drives for an organization that for years has been a NASCAR fixture, both in the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series, running many start and park races to help fund their primary number 39 car. Finally getting a sponsorship with the CMR roofing company there on the car. Finally getting a decent technical alliance, first with Chevrolet and then with Ford now with this effort. And now this year expanding to multiple cars that are none of them start and park efforts, that are all running full season efforts. All of this with a very small group of drivers and teams in there. Now, I'll tell you what, when it comes down to just the visuals of that, and I see Ty Gibbs putting Ryan Sieg on the wrong side of that, my first instinct is probably what most people's was, where it's like, well, hey, screw that. That's terrible, because now you got this one group out there that's out a car, and this other team that is not going to be punished for it, and they're going to be doing pretty well. I do think it was a bit of an over-aggressive move for Ty Gibbs at the beginning of that race. I do think he is a very aggressive driver. That's probably typical, but he's not the only one. I think there's a lot of other drivers that tend to run well over their heads in these races, and we see that get worked out even in the Xfinity Series there too. Luckily, there's some seasoned veterans like Sieg that kind of keep that in line. But then we have to talk about, of course, the incident that happened afterwards. So Ryan Sieg clears the crash clock, but then is afterwards warned by NASCAR to maintain minimum speed. At that same point, he's back out on the track with the right rear of his car taped back up, and he's slowing down around the track, and the 54 car is catching up to him there. And then as they go into turn 4, the same corner where the incident occurred, Sieg goes up the track, seems to be chasing the 54, kind of chasing them into the outside wall. During that process, the 39 car loses control, spins down the track, and 2 other cars behind them, those being Sheldon Creed and I believe Brett Moffitt, were coming through the pack. They actually avoided contact with the 39, but ended up putting themselves in the wall in the process. I believe Moffitt actually still got a top 10 out of that, finishing the 8th spot. And yes, Sheldon Creed as well, finishing in the 7th spot. So tremendous recovery for both those teams, but a bit of an unnecessary situation for the both of them. As I tweeted at the time, I certainly am sure, and Ryan made it pretty clear in his interview with Jamie Little on pit road that was intentional. I mean, he was not happy with what happened, and he clearly made very clear why he was not happy with it. And this was a situation that was going to put his team behind the 8 ball very early in the season, and again, unnecessarily. Now, when he was going up the track there and chased the 54 into the outside wall, made a little bit of contact with the left front. I do think, and I would be willing to give him the benefit of the doubt on this, I don't think that Sieg was going up there to try to spin himself out and do that. I think that, many people bringing up, of course, Landon Castle's encounter with Danica Patrick in 2012, I believe, at Kansas, that the first rule of NASCAR is to not wreck somebody while wrecking yourself. You can't forget the fact that the right rear of that car was destroyed, and that was the same point of the track where he had actually lost control. If anything, it was a poor choice of location for Sieg. Lost the car lost the car at that point and spun out. I'm sure he would have much rather just kind of shoved the 54 into the wall and then cut back down across the track and made it to pit road, where I'm sure he would have been parked at that point. But unfortunately, didn't play out that way. I'm sure he didn't want to just, especially if you're going to go out there and say that, this younger kid out there has trashed some of your equipment. You can't afford to trash more equipment. I certainly don't think Sieg's intention was to trash his car any more than he could. I think if he could force the 54 into the outside wall and kind of Ayrton Senna-like force him to make a mistake and destroy his own car, I think that would have been the more preferable method there. But again, at this point, we're all just speculating as to what the heck he was thinking at that point. But just an unfortunate situation on all fronts. And it ended up being a story that, of course, the broadcast was was only too happy to bring up that, oh my gosh, look at all this adversity that Ty Gibbs overcame. And taking the victory there. This brings up to, of course, the interview after the race. Now, there's been some people saying, look, what's the situation here with Ty Gibbs? and him coming out there and really pretty early on in his victory lane or front stretch interview rather, indicating that he was sorry for getting in the incident with Ryan Sieg. Some people were really, questioning that. I was like, well, look, I think that was a stand-up thing. You didn't have to do that. At that point, that was in such a distant past that we already had, a 45-minute snow delay. And, the race had been long, the 39 team, I'm sure had already even kind of loaded up and left the track at that point. So it was kind of ancient history at that point. He didn't have to bring it back up again. But I still give credit where credit's due, and that he didn't have to bring that up. And it was kind of cool that he did. Now, of course, yeah, I mean, was he coached to say it? Probably. Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know that for sure. I didn't listen to any of, I didn't hear any radio transmissions indicating it. And so I'm not going to just be all that picky about it there. But yeah, at the end of the day, the RSS racing team still got to piece another car together and get something presented for Phoenix this next week, which of course has already been a struggle for so many of these Xfinity teams out there. But, I'll give the kid credit for mentioning that because he didn't have to. Now, if he starts doing this every week, if he's like wrecking this guy that week and then saying it in victory lane and wrecks this guy and if he does it all the time, yeah, I'm going to be like, okay, there's something that's disingenuous here about it. But to me, so far, I'm not seeing that. I think this is a kid that he reminds me a lot of John Hunter Nemechek and some of these other drivers out there that are very aggressive. And then what will end up happening is they'll find another driver that's even younger, that's even more aggressive, and then they'll be rattling their cage. That's what kind of happened with John Hunter with Ty Gibbs now. So, will we see that? I don't know. But I think that these drivers are capable of policing themselves. I don't think people should come down all that hard on Ryan Sieg for it. Nobody was hurt or anything like that. And actually the drivers involved in it, still got decent finishes. So I think the damage in the aggregate was the middle of the road. We didn't see exactly the same thing as a Matt Kenseth, Joey Logano situation, which itself was a different form of policing and kind of a different, story in that sense. But yeah, that's kind of where I fall on that. I mean, I think it was unfortunate for both parties involved. I'm sure neither of them wanted a situation like that, but that was kind of the situation there. This also brings up another situation there. Jesse Iwuji in the number 34 car. Jesse's been getting a lot of criticism, and I think this really has been starting, especially since his truck series runs. I think he had a race at Charlotte where he was well off the pace, and there was an incident where a couple other trucks were tangled up with him in the first corner. And we're seeing a bit of this again this year. And it's unfortunate because this Emmett Smith program in the Xfinity series, I'm a big fan of getting any new team out there and new investors in the sport and people looking to try their efforts out there. But we saw also at the same time back at Fontana, Iwuji was well off the pace and dropping well back in the pack right from the start of the event. And we saw that back again at Vegas this week. And unfortunately ended up in a couple of incidents, the last of which being a very solid hit there that ended up eliminating Ryan Vargas and Stephen Parsons from the race. And again, that's a different kind of frustration there, where you have a driver that, perhaps either isn't quite ready for the Xfinity series yet. Maybe he needs to polish up a bit more in trucks or in ARCA or in something else. But again, I think the challenge is that when you get an effort together and you got Emmett Smith on the group there, and he's going to go out there and actually kind of get a run at the Xfinity series. Well, shoot, you're going to take it, even if, whether you're ready or not. But there was discussions during this broadcast about whether there should be a rule about like you spin out more than 2 times and maybe you should be parked. That might be a possibility. I mean, NASCAR has done that before. I think I brought up on this show before the story of Bill Meacham in the early 90s, who was came out of nowhere and ran his first couple races. I think his first race was at Darlington, and he ended up causing like 2 or 3 accidents in the very beginning of the race and was actually parked after that case there. So luckily we're not seeing something quite as egregious here with Iwuji, and we've seen him much more often in the truck series and the Xfinity series. But he does seem to have a bit of trouble maintaining minimum speed. And I don't know if it's equipment or experience or anything. Hopefully that gets explored a bit more here, because we've seen this out of him, whether he drives for Josh Rialm's team, for example, or this current program or some of the other ones in between. I don't know how that's going to shake out for him, but hopefully things work out there. I think it's very tricky when you have these sponsors and everything else in place. And again, it's nothing against him as a person. I mean, I've had the good fortune to speak with him at Phoenix a couple times, of course, with his military background, of course, he comes off very professional in interviews and everything. So I'm sure he's very receptive to any lessons that he learns out there on the track. But I get a little, I mean, it's the unfortunate problem in NASCAR, in any division that you're in, if you're off the pace by a significant amount, there's really nowhere to hide. And you can't really learn. I mean, you want to get as many laps as you can to learn as best you can. But even with this format now where NASCAR has compressed practice time down and all the different series and all that, you have even few, you have to kind of still use part of the race to learn. And if you're one of these guys out there that's still trying to get their feet under them and you're not exactly ready for prime time and you have those problems out there, unfortunately, you kind of get in the middle of these things, and I hate it for him because it's so early in the season, but we'll see if things work out. I mean, maybe he'll find a track that'll work better at, but it seems like at these 1.5 mile tracks, at least, he's kind of had a bit more of these issues keep up to speed. I don't think he's as egregious as like Mike Seneca, for example, where he was so unbelievably slow, even at a place like Martinsville, that the officials were just downright furious trying to get him off the track. I think with the backing that Iwuji has brought into the sport with his team and everything, I think they'll give him a bit more latitude. But again, I think there's still a limit with that. I mean, we see this from time to time. Sometimes you don't know if you're ready until you start trying. And so, that's sometimes a situation that works out there. But yeah, but that was a hard crash that they had back there with Vargas and Parsons. And really, again, a couple of organizations that also cannot afford to tear up cars. I mean, JD Motorsports has had both their cars tore up. Bailey Curry's wrecked across the finish line, though he still got an 18th place finish out of it. BJ McLeod's team had an absolutely frustrating date out there. Scary incident with Matt Mills down the back straightaway there, where you can actually see his head move forward inside the car. It was good to see Mills get out of the car there after a few tense moments there as the rescue teams came up to the 5 car there after the incident on the back straightaway. That same straightaway also collecting a couple cars from the Mario Gosselin team, Kyle Weatherman in an incident there on the back straightaway. And this is where our friend Joe Graf Jr. Ends up being a part of it. And this is another driver that's himself been a bit of kind of a center of controversy. Of course, in our Fontana show last week, we talked more about the situation where he wasn't able to qualify the 08 car because apparently it had been refitted for David Starr, who did indeed attempt to qualify that car this next week here in Las Vegas. The adjustments took up his practice time. The car wasn't really ready and couldn't get up to speed in qualifying, and he missed the show, had to buy Timmy Hill's ride with the Ford partnership and trying to find a car that, where a driver was about the same height as him. It really... height ended up being kind of the big issue with the whole Joe Graf situation at Fontana, which is unfortunate. But this time around, Graf gets the 07 into the show. Actually, it was the same car that Cole Custer gave the first start there for our first victory for Bobby Daughter as a team owner with the SS Greenlight Racing program. But unfortunately, Graf just had a miserable run out there. I mean, talk about Iwuji being involved in incidents. Graf was involved in a couple of those incidents on the back straightaway and also ended up picking up the cover for the air cleaner on the Stephen Parsons machine coming through turns 3 and 4. So he had already a frustrating day. I believe he was about 29th place at the finish of the race, but then he had some missing lug nuts on the car, and it was just enough to incur a disqualification and actually take the last place spot from Brendan Poole there at the back of the field. So a lot of drivers having all kinds of problems out there. Austin Hill has now been involved in back-to-back hard accidents there for Richard Childress's team after winning the Daytona opener. Brandon Brown had that self-inflicted damage that he took credit for at Fontana. He still had a good finish there. He tried to work some tire strategy into this race, but ended up having to make an unscheduled stop, drop back to 29th at the finish. Kaz Gralla looked like he was going to get a top 20 finish with his teammate. This week was Ryan Ellis. Gralla ended up running the back of a car that was making a last-second trip to pit road there and dropped him back to the 23rd spot. Jade Buford, after his hard crash at Fontana, only finished 28th. I mean, a lot of teams that are around the kind of the go or go home group. Apparently, the looking at the owner points going forward to the rest of the season, really had a lot of struggles out there. But fortunately, you had some other teams that actually did have some good runs. Mentioning Ryan Ellis, great run for him. I believe that was a new career best for him in the 13th spot. Finishing in the Four Loko car that Moonhead introduced a while back there. So great run for the Alpha Prime team, especially the fact that they had to go to the back of the pack because Tommy Joe Martins had some issues with that car back at Fontana. It was good to see him get a good run out there. Jeremy Clements just outside the top 10, finishing the 11th spot. We mentioned Sheldon Creed and Brett Moffitt coming back from the Ryan Sieg incident. Landon Castle almost got his first top 5 since 2011, finishing in the 6th spot in that burned up car. That was actually rebuilt. It's kind of interesting. I don't know if it was intentional with the paint scheme or not, but it looked like that symmetrical burn pattern was still part of the scheme, where the pink paint job was kind of muted a little bit around the fenders of the car. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But Noah Gragson is going to still have to wait at least until this October to try to win at his home track, finishes second to Ty Gibbs there. And all the other competitors behind him. John Hunter Nemechek, can't overlook him as well. I know not, underdog in the strictest sense, given his dominance in the truck series. But again, the Sam Hunt Racing team has really done so much of that Toyota program in just this first little bit. And great 12th place run out of them to build on Jeffrey Earnhardt's effort at Fontana, where unfortunately the alternator went out and kind of ruined what probably would have been a top 20, if not a top 15 run for him. Towards the end of that one. Anthony Alfredo, that 23 car, I'm still pretty pleased with that run, in spite of the fact that he was back in 17th. I still think that Our Motorsports 23 car is the kingmaker out there, even with the 27 now joining the lineup and Jeb Burton in that one. I look to see some great runs out of that 23 the rest of the season. Unfortunately, a little bit off in this one, but that's kind of where it shakes out. Joey Gase finishing the 22nd spot. That's a decent run for him. This is the track where Gase swept the last place runs in the Xfinity Series and the Cup Series not too long ago. So that's a fantastic run for him in comparison in a field of 38. But Joe Graff Jr., of course, your last place finisher in that one. We now go back to the Truck Series race on Friday. Chandler Smith beats the boss man, Kyle Busch, in the second spot. Looked like it was going to be, when you saw Kyle Busch on the entry list, I know you probably thought the same thing I did. It's like, oh my gosh, this is going to be another race where Kyle Busch just adds more weight to his trophy case, and that's about it. But no, apparently in this case here, both teammates there were kind of wrestling him for the win there. But Chandler Smith getting the victory there. Congratulations to him. Stuart Friesen in the third. Ryan Preece really looked like he had kind of an outside shot at actually taking the win away there at the end with the David Gilliland effort there, and another step that we're seeing out of his reserve driver contract. But he finishes back in the 4th spot there. Matty D in the top 10, the 6th spot there. Brett Holmes, I believe that was a career best finish, if I remember correctly, finishing in the 8th spot. He started 32nd in the lineup there, so that was certainly good to see. Dean Thompson bouncing back from his last place run at Daytona, so that was certainly good to see. Yes, first top 10 finish, in fact, for Brett Holmes. As for Dean Thompson, though, in the 40 truck, finishing in the 11th spot right behind Ty Majeski. Austin Wayne Self snuck through with the 9th place finish. Carson Hocevar in 13th. Chase Purdy bouncing back from a DNQ earlier this year to get a 14th place finish out of that. Good things to see there. But then, of course, at the other end of the field, we had quite a few frustrations. Blaine Perkins eliminated under the DVP, spun out onto the back straightaway off of turn 2, was going to be your last place finisher of that race. Unfortunately, just ran out of time after a second round of repairs on pit road. Ended up pulling him behind the wall. Looked like he was going to be your last place finisher, but Zane Smith, who finished in a spirited second place finish in this race, ended up falling just short of the victory. But then apparently non-conforming lug nuts was the reason for the penalty for the 38. It ended up dropped back to the 36th spot and disqualified there. So we had disqualifications on consecutive days between both Friday and Saturday. Colby Howard, Haley Deegan, and Jack Wood rounded out your bottom 5 there, with other drivers further ahead. I want to address also another topic that I didn't really talk about during the tweets because I saw the video after the fact. A rather shocking sequence of events there on the final lap of the race. That Spencer Boyd had spun out down the back straightaway and backed his truck into the inside wall and was apparently sitting there for more than a lap with the race coming down to the finish. Now, I have certainly been very clear that I am a big fan of making sure these races finish under green, and I'm not a fan at all of races finishing under caution. And I think it could certainly be debated whether or not this was a situation that warranted a caution to come out. On the one hand, the spot where the 12 truck had stopped on the apron is pretty far from the track. But then again, we had so many other incidents on the final lap, including ones that eliminated Jordan Anderson's truck there and John Hunter Nemechek's truck involved in it. It was a dangerous situation, clearly, at that point. Both those wrecks were pretty much in the same spot that the 12 truck was. So certainly there has to be some kind of a balance. Now, hopefully, whether it was a conscious decision to not throw the caution, knowing that the 12 truck had spun out down there, or if it was a situation where, like we saw with Trey Hutchins at Charlotte a couple of years ago, or I believe it was last year, that they just didn't see him there. If that were the case, then that's something that really needs to be kind of looked into more, because that can't be a pattern of conduct for the NASCAR officials, because then you're really putting somebody in danger. Not to mention the fact that in this particular case, and certainly they didn't have any way of knowing this at the time, Spencer Boyd had actually dislocated his shoulder in that incident down the back straightaway. We saw a lot of hard hits. Thankfully, not as much today in the Cup Series race, but definitely in the Xfinity and Truck races, hitting into the inside wall there. I thought that was a little bit alarming for sure. I think that on the one hand, I think the biggest difference for me is if it happens on the last lap and, they're coming at full speed, I think it's probably safer to just tell them to just go ahead and reach the finish line under green anyway, because it's going to be too dangerous. But if it's 2 laps to go, again, especially given after the Daytona race where they were so quick to throw the caution flag, they could have done it right there. And if they wanted to get a green, white checkered finish after that, they could have made sure that Boyd was safely off the track there before doing so. And maybe we wouldn't have had that incident between John Hunter Nemechek and Jordan Anderson. But I do think that was a bit of a mistake. I think that was probably not handled the proper way there. And hopefully that gets looked at. And if it is a situation where they couldn't see the truck out there, I know that Spencer was driving a black truck, but you can't use that as an excuse when, it's an available color just like any other vehicle out there. A Trey Hutchins truck wasn't even strictly black. It was like a dark blue, and they still said, oh, well, they couldn't see him. It's like he's sitting in the middle of the track. And in that situation, you actually had Johnny Sauter collide with him at high speed, and it could have been a very, very serious accident. But hopefully we'll, see what happened there. I did mention at the end of that race, I thought I was pleasantly surprised that Fox had actually chronicled what happened on that last lap, because last fall when I covered the races there in Vegas, the situation with Chris Wright and Tyler Hill didn't seem to get a whole lot of attention. But in this one, they showed what actually happened with John Hunter Nemechek and Jordan Anderson, although that was still only a piece of the replay and didn't include what happened with Spencer Boyd. Again, I congratulated them at first. I try to be as fair as I can when one of these, as critical as I am of these broadcasts, and we will talk about that video for sure. When they do something that I think they don't usually do, I'll certainly congratulate them for it. But in this case here, by leaving out the Spencer Boyd thing, I think that does negate that a bit. That should have been something that they were able to kind of keep an eye on, and it's kind of a big thing for them to miss, especially since it happened before they even got to the white flag. So that was kind of another thing to kind of look at there too. But it was completely missed. I admit I wasn't listening to Race Control at the time, so I don't really have a whole lot of information to add on to exactly what was happening with the 12 back there. But that's a different thing to kind of look at there too. But that would be the case there with that situation. But we saw, on the more positive side, we saw some other drivers that really were having some good runs. It was good to see Todd Bodine out there. I know he had a couple of incidents that dropped him back in the pack, but his march towards 800 combined NASCAR starts is back underway. His run at Sears Point coming up in June is going to be one of the stops on that trail, and that'll certainly be a story to follow when I do my next trackside coverage there this June. But a 21st place finish for Todd Bodine in the number 62, right behind Loris Hesmans, who made his first ever truck start for Josh Realm's team and finishing in the 20th spot. I thought that was very impressive. Lawless Allen was involved in, I think, the early incident with Blaine Perkins. Still got a 19th place finish out of that. A lot of good runs. Tate Fogelman had a near spin, finished in the 12th spot for him. I mean, a lot of people kind of climbed back into the contention here. And made for a pretty competitive night there. And any night where Kyle Busch doesn't quite get the victory, even if it isn't our KBM truck, that's still a positive thing. Even though Kyle Busch really has no business being in the truck series at all, never mind the Xfinity series. I think if he was frustrated about somebody lucking into a win in the Cup Series, he probably should focus a little bit more on that Cup Series ride in the meantime. But I know he won't hear that, and he'll probably just keep running more trucks in Xfinity races in spite of his planned retirement. So that'll be kind of another thing to certainly look at there too. Catch up on these super chats here too. Thank you so much for the super chats here. Michael Jensen, I saw your comment here. A great run for LaJoie in 15th. Another top 20 for Ty Dillon. Question for you: is a DVP clock helped with the last car, knowing a wrecked car is done early? Good question. So first of all, again, great. I have to agree. Great runs for LaJoie and Ty Dillon. I thought Ty in particular was very surprising in how well he did at Fontana. Didn't get a whole lot of coverage there. I saw for most of the race when I was sitting, it looked like he was running by himself most of the day. But at least when he was doing that, he was running at about mid-pack. So that was a decent run. Hopefully he can get the same kind of runs that Eric Jones has been having early on here, actually competing for wins. But that'll be something to see. And yeah, Corey LaJoie too. Fantastic for him. I think that's probably one of his best runs at Vegas so far. I remember him getting a last place run with BK Racing not too long ago. But your question though, the DVP clock helping with the last car contentions, it has to a certain degree. I think that the challenge is that there's not a physical form to the crash clock. Sometimes you see this with the broadcast. I think NBC did this a bit, where you have multiple drivers that are on the crash clock and actually show the time. That would be kind of a situation where, it's kind of helpful. I think one of the biggest ones, I thought that made where the DVP actually made things kind of interesting was at Indianapolis in 2020. Where you had the accident on pit road. You had about, 7 or 8 cars piling into each other with various degrees of damage and jumping back and forth between those channels and seeing where they were on the clock. I think the crash clock makes it challenging because you don't actually see the time. You have to really hear what the teams are relaying and saying, like, okay, this team has 3 seconds. This team has 30 seconds left. This team has 2 minutes left, and when the time starts and stops. Versus when they get, onto pit road or when they reach minimum speed. There's a lot of rules that add complexity to it, but I think I think it does make it a little bit easier because you'll hear when NASCAR actually confirms that a driver's out of the race before the actual call. Because if you listen to the actual commentary from NASCAR officials channel, and you'll see this again today, like in the Twitter feed, they won't usually declare if a driver's gone behind the wall for a mechanical issue and it's actually a terminal issue and they're not going to get back out. You usually won't hear about them actually falling out of the race for another 20 or 30 laps. I had one particular race at Phoenix where you didn't hear about it until it was like right before the finish of the event. I think with the crash clock, it does make it a little bit easier because you'll hear that the time has run out and they got to go behind the wall and that they're not going to be able to come back out. I think that in a sense makes it a little bit easier. So then I could kind of in my notes say like, okay, well, look, this person's not coming back out. We'll see how many more positions they drop or if anybody else is still on the clock. The clock is still short enough that when it runs out of time, you can actually kind of catch it when you're listening along. I think the problem is more of a racing purist. I'm not a fan of it still because I think one of the best parts of stock car racing is being able to go into the garage area and get your car fixed and get back out there and hearing the crowd cheer when a car comes back out there, even with the fenders missing and still trying to finish the race 30 laps down to get as many points as possible. I know the drivers don't enjoy that. I'm sure they would rather just be done. But I think it's also frustrating where, a car has what seems like not serious damage, but then for the brutal sin of turning left into the garage area, they can't fix those repairs now. Now they're just done for the day. This has caught, Almirola, Joey Logano. I think Josh Bilicki got caught up with this. A few other drivers have had this issue over the years. I think that's kind of the frustrating part of it. I think if you had a situation where they could still, get the repairs done without that penalty, that would be great. You still kind of have that path now where you clear the clock and then you can come back in and get more repairs done. I thought we were going to see that out of Christopher Bell when it turned out it was an engine issue back at Fontana last week. So there still is some pathway for it, which is nice. I think that's interesting to follow. But overall, to kind of answer your question, like I think it has made it easier, but I think it's eliminated some of the more interesting aspects of what makes a good battle for last place. That these guys are trying everything they can to keep these cars running as far as they can and for as many laps as they can, even if they're having mechanical issues. And I think losing that, I think is losing a little bit of that aspect of racing in that sense. So it's a good question. Thank you for the super chat on that as well. iRacer CB, I see yours here as well. Hey Brock, if you could take 1 year's roster of drivers and put them in a race with a next gen car, which would you choose? Ooh, that's a very good question. It's so hard to compare eras. I think that kind of what we were talking about in the Fontana show last week, I do think that this car is designed as much more of a driver's car. I do think that in spite of what we talk about with the crash clock here, I think it's still a very durable car out there. I think that, except for the tires seem to be the weak point, and then the throttle, the shift linkage and the, issues like that seem to be another weak point. But if you don't actually bounce the thing off the wall, I mean, Bubba Wallace kept going after he plowed right into those tires. They got the fender cut off with, and all that, and then he was able to keep going. That was impressive. Really, that's 3 races in a row now where that 23 car has had some kind of body work knocked off it, and it's been able to keep going. So I think if you had a really aggressive bunch of drivers out there, that would be interesting to see. I think maybe probably, for me, would it be better if you had guys from the 70s out there where you had independent drivers and they're used to just working on their own cars out there versus maybe, 5 or 6 megabuck teams out there that are going for it? I don't think that would be the most interesting group. I think the most interesting group would be if you had guys from the 90s where you had some seasoned veterans out there, like your Rusty Wallace. If you threw 1990s Rusty Wallace and Dale Earnhardt and Jeff Gordon in there, would Jeff Gordon figure out that car quicker than a guy like, Dale Earnhardt or Rusty Wallace or Bill Elliott or Dale Jarrett or Ricky Rudd or one of those guys? That would be kind of interesting. I wouldn't do it like in a 2000s era where they were kind of on the decline. I think in the 90s, maybe an early to mid 90s group, I think that would be really interesting because then you would have drivers like Rusty that were on the height of their powers and Jeff Gordon kind of getting up at the ranks and seeing if, would he be kind of literally the William Byron of the group, somebody that's just kind of getting their feet under him and picking up a win here and there, or would they have that many more, struggles there? I don't know, but that would be something else to look at there. But I think that would be my answer to that. I think that would be interesting, especially with a lot more of the short tracks out there and the road courses still being rare. I think if you had some of these expert road course drivers, road course ringers out there when they were still pretty common out there, or even Wisdom West guys out there, how would they handle this car? I think that would be the most interesting. I think you would have the most variables at play because you had so many different drivers and teams out there, and it's really hard to figure out who is actually best of it. And if you had some drivers that were kept back because they didn't have very good equipment, and then you have the next gen car, it's basically a spec car, how much of an equalizer would that actually be? I think you'd have to look at a really competitive era and see if that would still happen. I'm not sure if you get the same thing from maybe 2001, where you had guys like Kevin Harvick and Kurt Busch and stuff kind of coming into the sport. I'm not sure if that would be as interesting. But I think I'd like to see much more how veterans would handle this car, especially with what happened with Denny Hamlin today in the Cup race, where he missed the sequential shift thing after the muscle memory there and tore the thing up. That would be interesting to see. But good question, iRacer, for sure. And Alex, I see yours as well. Hey, Brock, in the world of paint schemes, is there a sponsor for you that consistently has the best paint schemes? For me, it's Valvoline Motor Oil. Good question. It's Valvoline's always a good contender. I'm not as big of a fan of the ones that Johnny Benson had and all that. I thought those were kind of iffy because it didn't seem to translate as well off Mark Martin's car in 2000. I mean, any of Mark Martin's Valvoline cars were fantastic. Each of those were instant classics. which I think is why it translates so well every time they use one of those for throwback weekend. It's not too difficult. But any other sponsors that are able to do that? My first thought was Pennzoil, just because, well, not just today being the Pennzoil 400, but also the simplicity of Michael Waltrip's paint scheme, or Johnny Benson's version when he had the 30 car, or, you know, Steve Park's car. I think that was a really good one. Even 2003, like his last year of having it, I think that had a fantastic look on it there. I think that was a really, that's probably a good one there. I think it's just because that's a scheme that's really hard to screw up. That if you have just the brightest yellow possible, and I was always a sucker for the teams that ran like colored rims. The other one would be STP. Never been a bad STP paint scheme, ever. Not even the 2000 season when they had to share sponsorship space with Cheerios. Cheerios, you probably could say, never had a bad paint scheme. Although the Clint Boyer one in 2011 wasn't that good. But yeah, STP for sure. I mean, I guess that fits in all of Motor Oil because they have such a recognizable branding scheme. Valvoline, you could even include Al Unser Jr.'s car in 1993, the one he wrecked in the duels. That would be another one. GM Goodwrench, yeah, there you go. I mean, you could probably say any automotive one. I think it's a big thing that's lacking in a lot of the sponsors these days is we're not, you know, we've now gone the other direction and we don't have as many of these different, throwbacks out there, or just regular paint schemes that are actually automotive related. There's something much more obscure, but yeah, probably STP and Pennzoil. Like, I mean, and I link those right in with your Valvoline pick there, Alex. So, good question. Thank you all again for the super chats on that. These are good questions for sure. Yeah, Pure Later schemes. Yeah, Derek Cope. I mean, goodness. But yeah, I'm seeing comments are M&M's, some of the other ones there too. I mean, those are good contenders. I don't know. I mean, M&M's, it seems like it's just running the same scheme basically. There's a little variance there. I think I mentioned this on the show before. I think my favorites of the M&M schemes is actually the M&M Minis one that Kyle Busch ran at Pocono last year. I thought that actually looked pretty good. Or maybe it was 2020 that he ran it. But I thought that looked really good. Having the much smaller M&Ms on there, because then it had, like, you could see the primary yellow color better, and the number kind of stood out more. I thought that was good. I think there's been some kind of bad M&M ones, though. I think in 2011, 2012, where you had, like, the brown splotches of the chocolate on there, or I think there was another version where they had like the M&M candy bars and they try to integrate that into the scheme. Anytime when they bring too much brown into it, like Elliott Sadler had that in 2003 when he went to Robert Yates Racing, and it didn't really work. I think when they bring too much brown into the scheme, it looks awful. It looks like mud. So that's not really been kind of my favorite there. Yeah, Kellogg's. There you go. Kellogg's even had that off scheme though in 2003, or not 2003, 1993. The kind of black paint scheme that Terry Labonte ran for his last year with Billy Hagan. That one wasn't very good, but but certainly the iconic number 5 car between like 1994 and like 99. Those are the glory years. That was a paint scheme that's desperately missed these days. Yeah, I mean, we can go on and on from there, but I think I would start, to answer your question there, Alex, I would start with, the paint schemes for the Motor Oil sponsors. Maybe even put STP ahead of Pennzoil. I mean, I like Pennzoil a lot. That was probably one of my first favorite paint schemes as a kid, but I always loved that STP car too. I got an STP car model back here too. Actually, wait, we got the cornflakes and we got the Pennzoil on this too. So there you got that on this one here. So we got all that. So you can actually pretty much look at anything on this and still get that look there too. But yeah. Oh, 86 viewers. Wow. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in here today. I was just pretty much kind of wrapped up talking about the Cup, Xfinity, and Truck races here. If you guys have any other questions from those races, we'll certainly talk about those as well. And we'll keep an eye on what's going on with technical inspection here and hopefully find out what's going on with that. I'm going to pull up Pockrace's feed here in the meantime, just kind of keep an eye on that. Still got the points here. We still got the results posted here, so nothing too much new on that end there. Greg Saxon, the Slim Fast car. Yeah, that's a good one. Or Quaker State, yeah. See, again, Quaker State almost put one into the M&M's category, where it was more just running the same paint scheme from one year to the next. They didn't really shake it up that much until about 94, where they kind of added the Q that was kind of shooting up from like the rear wheels, and they ran that those last couple of years. Hey there, Alex from Brazil. Thank you for tuning in. We got our international contingent on here. Appreciate you guys tuning in. This is actually our first live show we've done since the Daytona 500. So we'll be doing these live here as soon as possible after the race is concluded until our next trackside coverage at Sears Point in June. So if you guys are looking for more live, immediate responses to the races here, you'll definitely be getting those here over the next few months before we go back and hit the track again. But got some really interesting venues to look at coming up here in the meantime. Let me keep this pulled up here. There we go. So let me jump into talking about the video that was posted this week. Got a lot of interesting discussions and opinions there on the what took place in the video there. So this is something that's been kind of coming along here. And by this, I mean the NASCAR broadcast problems series, which is going to be a series. And I'll have more information on that a little bit later in the show here tonight. So this is something I flirted with the terrible broadcast series and some other ones where I did broadcast comparisons where I showed things kind of side to side. And I've been chewing on it for more than a decade now. I mean, that's no exaggeration. You look back at my archives here and you'll see a lot of videos that are in one way or another complaining about the quality of broadcasts or things that are just missing or things that just aren't done as well. And I think, and there was a lot of discussion about this after Daytona in particular. And I think Mike Joy was right to point out that, okay, maybe there's some issues that are from the broadcast booth, but some of these issues are also issues from the production crew. And there's only so much that the broadcast team has control over. And some of the videos in this series are going to be like that too. Some of these are issues more from the play-by-play booth, as you saw in the first episode. And some are going to be more of a production angle. And I'll try to differentiate those as much as possible because the intent behind this, and which has been the same intent between all these other ones that I've done to this point, is to try and really, make this, to make it concrete. To not just say, oh, I hate this, I hate that, I hate this. It's like, no, let me be very specific. Like, here's some examples of things that work, and here's some examples of things that don't work. And just show them side to side. I think the most convincing, I thought I was going to do narrating over it when I started putting this together before we went to Fontana. And then I was like, well, look, no, that's going to be too many cooks in the kitchen. I think the best thing I can do is just put these clips together, put like to like, and put them side to side and just say, okay, this is different. This is what the difference is. This is what I'm talking about. And put some text on the screen. And I think that was kind of the better way to go about it. I mean, it's definitely had some, negative. I know they don't post dislikes on YouTube anymore, which I'm not crazy about. I wish they were on there again too. But yeah, I think last I looked, it's at about a 92% approval rating on that one, which is it's a little bit below my until lap 11 video. Cause that one I think definitely got some people that, I think weren't exactly sure what I was trying to do in that video. That seems to be the moment that I usually kind of lose people, is they don't know what I'm trying to do. And that one was kind of like that. That one's about 95% right now. I mean, still more positive than not. I mean, if you have 95% on anything, I think if you're shooting for 100%, then you're doing pretty good, but you're never going to please everybody. And that's certainly, the case. And you're also not going to convince everybody either. I was interested in kind of the discussion on Reddit. I know a couple of people were linking me to the discussion that was on there, and people having issues one way or the other about the actual video. But I kind of got a couple of things to kind of talk about with this. But I think that's that was something to talk about. So really, with that video, I thought the things that was most compelling, what I wanted to do going into it was like, look, and I saw this again today. And I think one thing that really bugs me about it is like, they're talking about other stuff. They're not talking about the play-by-play, and they're not doing the play-by-play and what's happening during the race. And some people scoff at that. And they're like, oh, why don't you just listen to the radio? Okay. First of all, the radio, MRN radio or PRN or whichever broadcast company you're listening to, or IMS or anything else out there, that suddenly didn't just come into existence when Darrell Waltrip decided to be in the booth or any other arbitrary time in NASCAR's recent history. Radio broadcasts have always been there. Radio broadcasts were around when Bob Jenkins was in the booth, and there was no reason to listen to the radio if you're watching the TV. They were around when Ken Squire was in the booth. They were around, with any of that. A lot of people that ended up getting into the booth later had their start in radio, whether it was Mike Joy or Ken Squire or Alan Bestwick or these others there. So I don't like that argument because I think that's a bunch of crap, quite honestly. So that's one. Also, when you're going to have, and then I love the other comments where it's like, oh, I can't believe that you're comparing, Denny Hamlin and Kurt Busch to a golden age Benny Parsons. It's like, I didn't make that comparison. I didn't put them in the booth. You get the job. You're taking the seat that Benny Parsons once had. Guess what? If you're put in that situation, you're jolly well going to be compared to him. That's perfectly fair. Third of all, I got some comments on this that I was cherry picking on these videos. I don't see how picking lap 2 at the same track on the same network, during the same discussions where the lap is only 50 seconds, and I'm taking a clip that's 10 seconds from those 50 seconds at most. This is all pretty specific. I mean, this is a control group here where we're comparing one to the next. And in those examples, one thing that was very eye-opening when I was putting this video together, I was shocked that in all three of the Truck, Xfinity, and Cup races at Daytona, that by lap 2, where the race is not even a minute old, they're just talking about other stuff. They're not even describing what's happening on the track anymore. They're just completely checked out, and they're saying, oh, wow, look at all the Toyota. There's like Toyotas up here, and the Fords are going to be a family, and they're going to be doing, like, what are you talking about? Like, that's stuff you can do in a pre-race show or a post-race show. Or, you have NASCAR Race Hub this entire week. You have a multiple hour pre-race show before the race. You have all this, this high-tech digital pre-race studio in Charlotte. You can't find a time in all those slots to bring this stuff up. You're going to bring it up during the race when stuff is happening. I don't get that, and I don't buy that. I think that's insane. And the other argument there was, oh, well, this is something to bring casual fans in. Look, what happened to ESPN? The coverage is excellent. You'll be surprised how much you can pick up, like Tom Cruise said in Days of Thunder. Don't talk down to your audience. Just describe the action. If you're describing action, people are going to want to be invested in it. It's like, look at this is happening. Look at this is happening. Ken Squire got a lot of criticism in these discussions where it's like, oh, he's just exaggerating this. It's like, well, that's part of the job. It's like, and you can't do that entirely on the radio because you're trying to say, look, you're on board with this driver, or you're seeing this driver in front of him, and he's going 190 miles an hour. It's like, sometimes you have to kind of remind people about that. And those are things that are actively happening. So that's where that series came into play. And I think people are upset about it. Because probably they're seeing it and they're like, no, this is fine. I don't see any difference. If you don't see any difference in that, then you're just too used to the way that they've been doing it. And, it does have its roots back in 2001. And I don't want to blame, any one person for it, because it was probably a group organization thing. But it does seem like on the Fox side, you look at some of those older broadcasts, and you got Darrell Waltrip and Larry McReynolds, talking about their own thing. And Mike Joy is just doing the play-by-play by himself. And it's not a kind of a concerted effort, between the three of them. It's kind of a difference there. And they were trying some different things because ESPN had been in charge of most of the schedule, for like 20 years. So of course they're going to try something different. I think the problem is that once they found that formula, they just kind of stayed with it, and they didn't really innovate it any further from that point. NBC started doing it too. That's why you see in a lot of those, in that video, there's a lot of NBC clips. This isn't the Fox problem entirely either. I still think that there's points that, it doesn't quite work out either. So, I love getting called a boomer too. That's always fun too. Again, people kind of forget that I am older than most people that do YouTube stuff on here, first of all. So, okay, guilty. Come on, where's my, that's that. How many times have I showed you my bald head on these shows here? That's, I'm not hiding any of that. So, guess what? I was 18 in 2000. So yeah, my experience in that is going to be a little bit different than somebody that thinks that, Rick Allen is the greatest thing since sliced bread when it comes to broadcast. It's just not true. And I think it's going to take, it's going to take I've tried it every way I can. I've tried it every way I can that's not going to hurt people's feelings and just make it kind of silly or something, like the terrible broadcast video or the comparisons, and just be like, look, here it is. Here it is. Just see if there's differences here and see if you notice them. I'm just going to have to just start saying it. And, people aren't going to like it and people aren't going to be happy about it. But I'm sick of just sitting on the sidelines and seeing them do the same thing over and over and over. And, it should be viewed as a bad thing that people are muting the TV and listening to the radio. I mean, if you're doing that, then the broadcast is failing in its job. The camera work can only do so much. They're holding the information hostage from you. And I know that, I'm describing a scenario that a lot of people like myself on social media do, where we're trying to fill those gaps in and tell you other things that are happening. Guys like Racing Underdogs, that listen to the scanner of these other teams back there and tell you what's happening. And again, careers have been built like, Jeff Gluck and Pockrass and these other guys that really, Clara B. Lang, that really focus on these stories, just to name a few, that have really focused on this and have built this up. And I think the reason they've been able to build a good readership is because there's a real desire for this information that you just don't get from the broadcast. And the broadcasts have just become, frankly, a farce. And it's sad because it doesn't have to be. And it doesn't require a big change. See, I mean, in this one video, I'm only suggesting like one small, simple change. All you have to do is just tell us what's happening. The problem is, tell us what's happening has now been given the broadest possible definition, where now we're talking about, it's like, wow, look, I think there's these teams that are linking up and there's all this. It's like, just tell us what's happening. Tell us who's in this car. Tell us what's happening with this team. Tell us, people saying that there's storylines. Like, what storylines? I never hear any storylines beyond, Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott, they don't like each other. They got in a thing. And it's like, that was a nothing story at Fontana. There was nothing there. Okay. The spotter screwed up. He looked at Joey Logano's car instead of Chase's. They made contact. It happens. Chase screwed his car up from hitting the wall early in the race. The car was falling apart towards the end. Other cars were falling apart if they bothered to look, whether it was Michael McDowell's car or others at the back of the field. So these cars, they fall apart after a while if you start beating them up. Eric Jones had it happen today. It was simple as that. I mean, but if they want to just keep talking about it and make a big story out of it, while all this other stuff is happening, it's like, no, who cares? They got their own Spencer Boyd that's still sitting on the track for 2 laps and, all that. So, I've been chewing on this series, and in fact, I already made an episode 2. Those of you who are in the Patreon, a $5 level and up, you can actually watch the video right now, or I'd recommend actually after the show tonight. But you do have available access to episode 2 of NASCAR Broadcast Problems, and this one will also be focused on the play-by-play. So we're just going to keep going. We're just going to go one by one. We're going to pluck out one feather at a time. We're going to say, yep, that one. Nope. Yep, that one too. And we're just going to go right through it. I don't know how many parts it is. I might, it might just be covered in 5 episodes for all I know. But maybe not. But this is not replacing the Field Filler series or anything like that. So I don't want to make it. I think that was the other concern that people had. It's like, oh man, he must be reaching for content. I saw somebody say, it's like, yeah, reaching for content. That's why I post a video like, once every month or 6 weeks, because I'm reaching for content. No, it's absurd. It's absurd. But I know people are just, pointing stuff out because they're trying to understand what's happening, and that's not what's happening. So, yeah, but the situation with these broadcasts is it's untenable. And when you see these patterns, and yeah, we're going to have to compare them to the old broadcasts because, all right, I'm not just saying these old broadcasts are better because they are old. I'm saying these broadcasts are better because they did things differently. They did things in a more active and engaging way. A way, by the way, that we could still do today. If they just change their strategy a bit, they can do it the same way. I'm not saying this is impossible and it's never going to get better. That's not the message that I'm doing with this series. I'm saying if they did it like this is why this worked. And this is why this doesn't work. I think that if you don't do that, they're just going to just keep doing this forever and ever. And I think that a consequence of this is that, you have NASCAR is always in favor of making the biggest changes possible. If not everybody in the world is a NASCAR fan, they're like, okay, something is wrong. We need to do something big. We need to have a race in the Coliseum. We need to have a completely different car. We need to have this. We need to have stages in the races. All these things, I think a lot of these changes that NASCAR has made have been because they just aren't taking the wheel when it comes to the broadcast. They're not making sure that the TV broadcast is as engaging as possible. And I think that's where the issue is. I think that maybe if something is working, that it's not pursued well enough. And if something isn't working, that they're not fixing it. And again, it's something that I just don't sense that there's any forward momentum in actually fixing anything. I think they're just searching around in the dark, and they're resting, if not sleeping on their laurels. And it's unfortunate. And I think some are more guilty than others. I think Mike Joy still does a really solid job in the booth. And, and I do admit some bias in that, but I do think because you watch some of these old clips and you hear his broadcast from 2001, he's still doing it. He's still doing the play-by-play, but that's so rare compared to a lot of the other people that are doing it these days. It's different. And what really grits at me is that sometimes, he just gets kind of ridiculed by some of the other guys, out there or fans are saying, oh, well, he's just old. He's talking about stuff that doesn't matter. It's like, no, dude, Mike Joy has seen more than you and I or anybody else has ever seen in their careers. The guy, he has a tremendous amount of knowledge. He should be treated with the same reverence that Ken Squire was, in the late 90s, or Chris Economaki or Dr. Dick Bergeron or any of those guys. He deserves to be treated in that same sense. And I think that there's a lot of people that are, that are treating it like that. So, I think. And now, again, I think that at the same time, again, another reason I made some tweaks to the video is I sensed that there was some positive responses to Matt Kenseth being in the booth. And I don't want to negate that. Like if there's a broadcast where they're trying some things and maybe it is working, okay, then let's start going that direction. But there are some very clear issues that I do think need to be kind of brought to light. And yeah, this series is gonna do that. And it's I think it's things maybe they're not even aware about. Maybe these haven't been articulated very well. But I think that's the important thing to do. And I've been trying to find the right way to do it. I thought about just doing one massive video that has everything in it. But then I thought if I do that, I'm going to, I'll point at it and be like, oh, this is all the problems. And then I'll forget some other issue. And then that has to be dealt with later. So I think doing it in this small little piecemeal way, I think that'll also be, more accessible for people in general. So hopefully that'll be kind of the approach there. But yeah, but that's one thing to really look at. So episode 2 of the NASCAR broadcast problems is available on the Patreon. I think I'm going to make it publicly available early this week here, so that'll be good. But yeah, I think the more of these that are made and the more critically we look at it, and I may branch out to beyond just these broadcasts too, because I think there are some other specific examples that were from other races that'll make it easier to understand. I think that's the kind of thing to look at. Yeah, but I think that's really the big thing to look at. I think NASCAR has reached a limit of what they can do to make this sport as accessible to as most people as possible. I think that NASCAR, if anything, needs to realize that it's always going to be kind of a niche thing. And there's going to be people that, it's okay. It's okay if people don't care about the sport. I mean, believe me, I've been the one NASCAR fan in just about every social circle I've been in. And I have done so much trying to get people into the sport. And every time people they smile and nod, and it's like, no, they're not into it. They're not into it. And that's fine. And that's fine. I think where NASCAR kind of goes awry lately is they feel the need that's like, okay, well, somebody's not interested in it. Oh, that's a problem. Oh, we need to change everything. We need to change this. We need to change that. We need to do this, or they're getting, they don't have to. You don't have to. And I think what's happening more than anything right now, and I think it's still a credit to NASCAR here. I don't want to mean to be too critical on them. I think what's happened is after all this stuff, where nobody can leave their homes and all these other regulations and stuff are in place, and now people finally get to go outside. I think they're anxious to do any kind of social activity. I think they're anxious to do anything and be in as big of a crowd as possible. And my goodness, what bigger crowd can you get into than a NASCAR race, or, you know, or go to the Indy 500? I mean, Indy this year is going to be insane. That was really the sense that I had especially at the Clash, and to a degree Fontana as well. I think so many people were just so happy to just be out and about doing anything. And I think that tide is going to lift all boats. I don't think just NASCAR, and people are probably discovering it, you know, just because it's there, you know, and that's good to see. I think we've seen the same thing out of IndyCar. I mean, the Grand Prix of St. Petersburg seemed to have a tremendous exposure out there as well, which is fantastic for them. So I think now when you have that attention, I think this becomes even more important. I think if you're going to I think you need to make the broadcasts more alluring. You need to make them more engaging. You can't just do the same thing that you've done for, you know, since 2001 or 2010 or whatever the time period is. I think you got to mix in some older things that really worked during the last boom of the sport. And I think they go hand in hand, but I don't want to go round and round on that too much there, but that's kind of where I am with that. So, but yeah, that series is still going to keep going. And the next episode of that, look forward to that this week. So we'll have that there. But if you're at the Patreon, $5 level and up, patreon.com/LastCar on Brock, you already have access to that as well. So we have that coming up. But yeah, I'm pleased to see that the sport's doing well. But I think that, again, if there's a small issue that could make it more sustainable, that would be another thing to certainly look at. So let me get this refreshed here. I saw the comment. Yep, there we go. Thank you. I saw a couple people mention this in the chat. Tech complete, no issues, says Bob Pockris. Bowman is the winner. So we do not have a sweep of 3 consecutive disqualifications at Las Vegas this weekend. I got some questions asked about this as to the last time that we've ever had 2 disqualifications so close in time. And this is actually mentioned in the Xfinity article, but I'll talk about it here as well. 1955, back when they had midweek races, kind of like what we saw a little bit of in the 2020 season. Back then, Jim Reed had illegal pistons on his car and was disqualified after he won a race. I believe it was at Greenville Pickens, the 200-lap race. He was disqualified from that one and classified in last place. And then this race was on a Thursday. He had another race that was on a Sunday. Apparently had the same pistons or another form of non-conforming pistons on the car and was disqualified again. But in that one, he actually finished 3rd from last and dropped out about 8 laps into the race. And he was dropped back to the very last spot in the race as well. So that was in the space of a couple days. But this is different from what I mentioned earlier with the 2017 Denny Hamlin thing with the encumbered finishes, or the 2017 qualifying races at Daytona, where both the JTG cars swept the last place runs in that one as well. So there were a couple other examples from back then, but this is definitely the first time it's been on consecutive days. That's for sure. So that would be another one to look at too. So we'll definitely check that out. Alrighty. So we'll jump into our trivia segment here. I don't really have anything for our show and tell segment today. I know we talked about the book. I can mention with the J.D. McDuffie book. I'm still in the process of getting that one republished here. So we're going to get that back online here very soon. I actually ordered just another proof of the book this week because to get the pictures kind of looking a little bit more clear. So we'll get that back set up for you. And then hopefully this time, sometime this month, we'll get that available. That'll get us back going again on the Derek Cope book and get closer to getting that done as well. A lot of plates spinning in the air here. So a lot of things we're kind of working on this end as well. So we'll certainly be finding out on that. All right. So let's see here. Let's get into our trivia segment. We'll bring out our late 90s trivia device here. And we'll see here. So again, for those of you new to the show, we just use the old Trivial Pursuit NASCAR deal here. We'll do a few questions off of this to wrap up the show for this evening now that we have the results from technical inspection. For those of you just tuning in, Alex Bowman officially now credited with the win in Las Vegas. No technical infractions for teams, at least according to Bob Pockris' tweet from just about 10 to 15 minutes ago. So we apparently will not have 3 consecutive disqualifications this weekend, which means that Daniel Suarez will be your last place finisher for the race here this weekend. So let's take a look here. The categories on this one are, again, NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild cards. So go ahead and pick your favorite category in the chat here. Again, they are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. And then again, if you guys have any other questions about the racing action this weekend, don't feel free to go ahead and ask in the chat here as well. I saw Two Sheds. I saw your comment. Thank you for the Larry Foyt video. You're very welcome. That was a fun one to put together too. Again, I got to credit. There's the we actually went over to the Fontana track. I got to meet with the guy there that suggested the video. It was Ian over at the Penske team there. We got to meet up over at the Fontana track there. He was actually the one that sent me a message over the off season there about doing it. I'm like, wow, that actually sounds like a fun subject to do. So first of a couple videos that were kind of fan suggested there. I do have a couple other videos in the works in terms of the driver profiles. Both of those are pending doing some interviews here. They've been just a little bit tricky to set up here. So I'm hopeful now that we're done with our trackside portion of the coverage for a little while here, I can get back on that, get those done pretty soon. So those will be exciting here. So again, the categories here, I can go ahead and pick in the chat, are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Those are our categories here as well. Alrighty. All right, tracks. Okay, we're kind of all over the place here. We got a couple for tracks. Congrats to Trackhouse. There you go. Yeah, unfortunate for the last place finish there for Suarez, but I do believe that they will win, if you will. So we'll see what happens on that end. But yes, Bowman, your victor for today. When will I go to another race? I saw your comment there, Kevin. Next time I'm going to be going to a race will be at the Sears Point, also known as the Sonoma Raceway. That'll be the that'll be the weekend of June 10th to the 12th this summer. So that'll be the next time that I'll be at a track there for any kind of coverage. Nothing really coming up here in the short term here in the meantime. We'll be doing some house sitting here the next couple of weeks, so that'll be a little bit different. But yeah, would love to pick up some other races later this year. We're still looking at Las Vegas in October and Phoenix in November after that. Possibly doing Darlington in September. That is still very up in the air, so we'll see what's going on here. But that's kind of another thing we're looking at. Let's see. See a couple here. I see like 4 for wild card. I see 3 for drivers, 1 for teams, tracks. Okay, we'll probably go ahead and do the wild card. It seems like that's kind of the front runner here. All right. Okay, here we go. First question of the evening. Whose 1997 winnings and endorsements placed him 3rd among all athletes? Whose 1997 winnings and endorsements placed him 3rd among all athletes is the first question. Going way back to the late 90s. More Mountain Dew Code Red, the old Ricky Craven cup holder here. Whose 1997 winnings and endorsements placed him 3rd among all athletes? I'm seeing a lot of Jeff Gordons pop up here. Feel like I'm living the 1998 season all over again. And 1 for Earnhardt. There you go. That's exactly what 98 felt like. All right, here we go. Whose 97 winnings and endorsements placed him 3rd among all athletes? The answer is Dale Earnhardt. Dale Earnhardt is indeed the correct answer. Two Sheds, you got it. All right. It's a glare here. We're trying to read this. What winner of the 1997 Pepsi 400 has a college degree in business management? What winner of the 1997 Pepsi 400 has a college degree in business management? Yeah, Miss PPI Motorsports. Yeah, just missed the Tide ride in general. I loved it when Eric Jones ran the paint scheme again. That was really cool. That's still the one I use for our diecast championship lineup there, just off camera here. What winner of the 1997 Pepsi 400 has a college degree in business management? All right, seeing Terry Labonte's and Mark Martin's and John Andretti's. All righty, here we go. The answer is John Andretti, the late, great John Andretti. I still don't like to believe he's not with us, but there you go. John Andretti. What baseball team? Uh-oh, we got... okay, with the strike going on here, we'll jump into this. What baseball team does Dale Earnhardt cheer for? What baseball team does Dale Earnhardt cheer for? Don't look it up. Try to guess it there. What baseball team does Dale Earnhardt cheer for? Yeah, the wild card hops around a little bit. Alex Luft, I saw your comment there about Tony Stewart wishing he was like James Hunt, calling idiot drivers out. That's something that Wally Dallenbach did a lot with NBC. I thought he was pretty good with that. He had kind of a Derek Daly kind of angle to him. An excuse to make a cringy casino parody. There you go. One thing these broadcasts love, they love their Vegas puns. I'll tell you what. I mean, it's just easy to just dismiss. I don't think it's the most grating of broadcast problems, but they certainly are noticeable. I think out of all the races they do, like probably Vegas is the one they look the most forward to. It's like, oh my gosh, we get to talk about like who's gonna crap out, who's gonna cash in, who's got a royal flush, who's got a winning hand, who's gonna gamble on tires. Okay, maybe it is kind of a problem. What baseball team does Dale Earnhardt cheer for? I got guesses for the Atlanta Braves. You got the Cubs. You got the Kannapolis Intimidators. Good guess. There you go. It doesn't say Major League Baseball. Toronto? That'd be something. The answer is indeed the Atlanta Braves. A lot of you got that one. Atlanta Braves. All right. What driver, next question, what driver was dubbed Chicken Snake by his crew chief, Tony Glover? What driver was dubbed Chicken Snake by his crew chief, Tony Glover? That's a new one on me. I'll tell you what. Chicken Snake. Who was nicknamed Chicken Snake by Tony Glover? Do. Alrighty. Yeah, it'd really be a shame when Mike Joy retires. Exactly. Yeah. I do like the old MRN broadcasts, but they're fun to listen to, but they're their own thing. And when you're doing radio, you can't say like, look, you got to look at this or, see how this is playing out. Like that's always different. I think that's where the TV broadcasts are different from the radio ones. And the radio ones exaggerate a lot of things that aren't true too. I remember at the Clash, they had something that's like, oh my gosh, the crowd is going delirious. And my brother is sitting in the stands. He's just kind of looking. He's like, what the heck is this guy talking about? Is he talking about this race? Like, I mean, they were into it, but I don't think delirious is the word. What driver, this is the question again, what driver was dubbed Chicken Snake by his crew chief, Tony Glover? I guess it's for Sterling Marlin, Ricky Rudd, Ernie Irvin, Dale Jarrett, Smokey Eunuch. Found a very nice Morgan Shepherd hat on eBay. There you go. Right on, Steelworks. Morgan always had good gear, so that's for sure. And the answer is indeed Sterling Marlin. Sterling Marlin, the two-time consecutive Daytona 500 champion, aka Chicken Snake. I've never heard that before. That's definitely a first one on me. All right. There we go. So again, this is the late 90s, so this might be a little more difficult. How many race segments is the Winston divided into? How many race segments is the Winston divided into? Yeah, I gotta say, the 92 Winston of the terrible broadcast is probably the one I'm most proud of. I mean, well, the 98 one, I went too far on that one. That was just silly, like the thing with the opening. But, you know, I laughed myself too hard when I said, like, you know, it's like, you know, stranded without a ride, this a kind motorist pulls over, but for these four men, there is just one seat. And I got too high on my own supply. I was just laughing. I just laughed my head off after I did that. I was like, okay, I have to put this up online because this is just too stupid. But the 92 Winston one, I loved the segment with, it's like, you know, it's like, well, you know, it's like now there's stages in this race, but you see, I'm going to explain these to you. It's like, okay, first there's segment 1, and then there's segment 2, and then after that, it's segment 3. And then if you win segment 3, you win the race. It's like, oh, well, that's really helpful. Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes these broadcasts aren't too far from that. We'll be finding some more examples for sure, but that'll be another one there. So how many race segments is the Winston divided into? All right, we got 3s, we got 2s, we got 4. Isn't it like 40 laps, 20 laps, then 10? Oh, yeah. Well, see, again, we're talking the late 90s. It doesn't say exactly what year. And it says it in the present tense. How many race segments is the Winston divided into? So whatever year we're talking. I got this in 2001. So you can conclude that from there. I think it was before the Winston. No, it was after. I graduated in June. So I had a grad night party, and they had this at a door prize. But, yeah, the Winston would have been over by then. That was one with the rain. Man, there's going back in the time machine there. How many race segments is the Winston divided into? And the answer here is 3. 3 is the correct answer. Kevin Love, you were the first one to get that one correct. A lot of you got it. 3 is the correct answer. Alrighty. Next question here. What driver earned all district honors as a linebacker at a Texas high school? What driver earned all district honors as a linebacker at a Texas high school? A 1, a 2, oh, okay. 3. There you go, Austin. Yeah, you got the reference. Plus, I love the Joey Logano, Dr. Octagonopus reference there with the face. It's the lips that throws me off. Like, I know they're just showing a picture of him celebrating with like the other drivers, but why did they use a filter that makes his lips look so dark red? It just looks exactly like the Dr. Octagonopus thing from like the Flash video. I don't know why they did that, but it's exactly what it looks like. I mean, it doesn't not look like anything else, but I don't know. Anyway, what driver earned all district honors as a linebacker at a Texas high school? Okay, I'm seeing guesses. Oh, hang on, I'm scrolled up too high. There we go. Bobby Labonte, Jimmy Spencer, Hillen, Terry Labonte, Spencer, Hillen. Seeing a lot of Hillens. Okay. What driver earned all district honors as a linebacker at a Texas high school? The answer is indeed Bobby Hillen Jr. A lot of you got that one. All right. Okay. And I think Jeffrey Robertson, I think you might be the first one to get that one. Oh, gosh. Okay. Here we go. Okay. We'll do one more question here and probably wrap up here for tonight. It's West Coast race. I know it's about 9:30 on the East Coast here, so I'll let you guys go a little bit earlier here. But I appreciate you all tuning in. Wow, we still got 53 people in here. Thank you so much for everyone tuning in. Hope you've enjoyed the show tonight. If you like these shows, definitely stay tuned for more behind the wall episodes here after usually about 15 minutes after the conclusion of each Cup race, and we'll talk about the action. So here's our next question, our last question for the evening. How many drivers have won the Busch Clash from the pole through 1997? Don't look it up, but we're looking for a number. How many drivers have won the Busch Clash from the pole through 1997? Talked about in the Scene Vault podcast. Yeah, that would explain it for sure. I live in your... Love you guys always watch. Awesome. Thank you, Big G. How many drivers have won the Busch Clash from the pole through 1997? Our last question for the evening here. And yes, more content coming up for you guys here. Not just the broadcast issues, but also more driver profiles here. Hopefully, now the season's underway, it'll be a little bit easier to catch some of these here. But I have two that are, the scripts are pretty much done. I don't want to get them done until I get the interviews. The Hermie Sadler one was one of those, but it was pretty clear to me that I wasn't going to get a hold of him because I think he's just so busy. And it was already too long waiting to get that one done. So I just kind of went through and finished that off. The next two videos I'm planning are pretty much in the same position as that one. So hopefully once we get these interviews in, I think it'll be really good. So I'm excited to get those going. But those of you who are in the Patreon, especially at the $5 level and up, you'll have advanced access to those. How many drivers have won the Busch Clash from the pole through 1997? We got several guesses. 7, 9, 5, 6, 4, 2, all over the place. Here we go. The answer is 3. 3 again. 3 is the big number of the day. But not in Victory Lane. It's still 48 there. But yeah, 3 is the correct answer. Glenn, Big G, I think you got it first. Glenn 7000, you got it also. Unless I missed something else there. All righty. Yes, NASCAR Man's video on the Goodyear and Hoosier tire war. I think that was the first video I narrated for him. And yeah, that was a really good script because I remember when that happened as a kid, and I thought he did a very good job handling a very complex topic there too. So I enjoyed that. So yeah, if you haven't checked that video out, just like WWE Syndicate, definitely check that one out for sure there. But thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. That will do it for our show this week. Our next show is going to be next Sunday, pending weather. Hopefully it doesn't snow down there like we saw a little bit on Saturday. But it will be after the, usually about 15, 20 minutes after the conclusion of the Cup Series race. We'll talk about the action. I believe it's just the Xfinity and Cup Series this next weekend there. So that'll be a good conclusion to the West Coast swing before we head back to Atlanta, I believe, if I'm remembering that correctly. So we'll get back down to that. Feel free to check out any of the other videos on this channel from my Twitter feed at LastCarOnBrock, the website lastcar.info. The article on Daniel Suarez will be coming later this evening with the statistics on there. And if you're interested in some bonus content or seeing the next NASCAR broadcast issue video first, that is at patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. And we're very close to our next goal of doing another starting grid video for a Cup, Xfinity, or Truck Series race later this year. For more details on that, you can check out that website as well. So until then, I will see you guys next week. In the meantime, do it, Brockapella.